Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Data Cloud Now, where I'm now delighted to be joined by Jeff Morrison, Chief of Analytics and Data Management at Northeast Georgia Health System, along with Jesse Cugliota, Global Head of Healthcare and Life Sciences at Snowflake. Gentlemen, such a pleasure to sit down with both of you here this afternoon.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Looking forward to diving in. Jeff, at Northeast Georgia Health System, you have more than 1,000 beds and more than 1,500 medical staff members representing more than 60 specialties. What are some of the biggest challenges you've faced making data more accessible across the organization, and how has your team approached enabling self-service analytics in such a complex environment like healthcare?
Well, right now what we've been able to do is take all our reporting metadata. There's 1,700 reports, so people don't know what we have. We've taken all that metadata and put it in Snowflake's Cortex LLM, and now people can ask English questions and say, give me the top 5 readmission reports, as an example, right? And then we started bringing in Workday data so people can say, what reports do my peers get? So it's really kind of neat in the sense that before they didn't know, my developers didn't know, so they'd open a ticket and then we just go build another report. The inventory gets really big. So now our developers can also say, give me all the reports that haven't been used in a year. We can turn them off. And so we're taking all the metadata from our reporting and pushing it out to the customer, allowing them to do that. We've reorged our entire reporting department to now have 5 people in self-service and 5 people in reporting. So we're putting all hands down on self-service for assuming that their metrics are to close tickets by the customer, not by writing a report. That's their success. So.
Great to hear. Very much a top-down approach. Jesse, from Snowflake's perspective, how have you seen data strategy in the healthcare and life sciences evolve in recent years? And what innovations are Snowflake developing specifically to address the sensitive nature of healthcare data?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things that have been driving some of the shifts that we've seen. One of the big ones is that 80% of the world's data just became a lot more usable to us, not just within healthcare, but across many different industries. And when I talk about that 80%, I don't mean the data that typically would have shown up in a report or a dashboard that's been under quality control for several years now. It's all of the other stuff that fell outside of that ecosystem. And often these data were unstructured, multi-modal in some cases. I think about things like clinicians' notes or audio recordings coming into a patient call center, or even contracts and policy documents within an organization. Those things have always been difficult to get our arms around because of the nature of the data themselves and the structure there. And we actually did a survey. We talked with over 1,900 different organizations around the world, and more than half, 58% of them said that their number one challenge was making their data AI ready, and 75% of them said that the unstructured data was a particular challenge for that. And I see this as a huge opportunity for Snowflake because so many folks are now turning to us as kind of their AI data foundation, because we are building capabilities to address a lot of these various different data types. So for example, if you want to stream in sensor data from a wearable medical device or from a temperature pack on a cold chain shipment, for example, we have Snowpipe streaming where you can do that in real time. The core interoperability formats in our industry, HL7 and FHIR, those can be landed directly natively in Snowflake in our variant data column type. And we're introducing a new capability this week. We call it AI SQL, where you can now leverage AI-like functions directly from the SQL prompt, so you can actually work with images and audio. So if I want to, ask a question of an MP4 file from a patient services call center, I could say, did this patient report an adverse event as part of a SQL statement? The fact that all this can be done in a single platform without, a whole bunch of different tools makes this multimodal data challenge much more solvable at the end of the day.
Great to hear, Jesse. And Jeff, we often hear that generative AI's impact is huge, but operationalizing it and doing it responsibly is a real challenge. How have you ensured AI is being applied thoughtfully and safely in the healthcare setting?
So we built out an AI acceptable use policy that starts with, but anybody that is going to be using AI has to go through a certain set of training. We have lots of training in healthcare, as you know, mandatories. AI is starting to become part of our mandatory training that we have. So I think it's really around education to start with. Any new application that's bought that has AI has to go through a governance council, be accepted by IT security, no matter what. So it goes through the right gates to at least be put in the right spot. We use Azure, with their stuff in their tenant. We use Snowflake. So those are the 2 platforms that are certified for PHI and allowed to protect our data and do what we need to do. We have 2 platforms to do that. So security plays a big role in that, especially protecting our data. So.
Thank you for that perspective, Jeff. And similarly, Jesse, beyond the data foundation you spoke about, what other elements are important to drive an effective AI strategy across the enterprise, and how is Snowflake helping here?
Yeah, I think beyond the data foundation we talked about, when we talk with customers, there's three things we hear about, and Jeff, you just mentioned one of them. One, people are thinking about what is our strategy around the AI models themselves. I think this space, the foundational model space, is moving incredibly fast. It seems like every other week there's a new model that drops that we all have to learn about and become educated around. And most folks have a strategy much like what you just mentioned, to say, hey, we're building our framework around OpenAI or Anthropic or Google, or hell, by the time this interview airs, there might be a new company that we don't even know about yet that I'm talking about. That's one of the challenges, is this space moves incredibly quickly. I think one of the other challenges that we've seen is that there are different costs involved with different models, and there's not a one-size-fits-all approach that people are thinking about. And I was at a research conference not too long ago, and someone was saying, we have these super complex models that run in billions of parameters, and people can ask questions like, identify the sub-cohort of patients who have conditions X, Y, and Z that are going to respond positively to this new compound that I have. But you don't want that same researcher who's working late into the night saying, oh, and by the way, what time does Taco Bell close tonight, right? Like, there's probably a much more cost-effective way to answer that question than that 9 billion parameter model that we spoke about. So one of the ways that Snowflake is addressing this is that we are keeping up to date with the best of breed models from the industry, and then you can choose them within Cortex for whatever your needs are at that moment. So that's really one of those three key elements. I think the second one, and you've touched on this as well, is how do we upskill the workforce? A couple of years ago, everybody was thinking about the talent challenges. How do we hire more data scientists? Or how do we train people to be data scientists? To build models, to engineer features. Now it seems like the emphasis is more around how do we train people to interpret the output of these models? How can we trust that the answer isn't just going to be followed blindly, but people understand the context in which it was generated, the data in which that model may have been trained on, so they can make educated decisions there. And I think the third piece really goes down to trust, because that goes hand in hand with that. And one of the things that we've all seen as we've experimented with some of the commercial grade models is that if you ask it a question, you'll get an answer. Right? It may not be the right answer, but you will get an answer. And one of the things that I'm really proud of that we're doing at Snowflake is that we are willing to say, if someone asks a question in Cortex that we don't have the answer for, it will respond with, I don't know, or I don't have the data to answer that question. And I think that's really critical to engendering that trust amongst the user base.
Absolutely. Clinicians, if you ask it a question and it gives you the wrong answer, they're going to say, I'm not using this again.
Never again.
I'll never use it again.
There's never going back from that.
Never going back. So you got to be careful too that use the SQL Cortex, against metrics or dimensions, so you don't get any hallucinations. But the more sophisticated models coming out,
right,
are going to be a little harder to do. We got to teach that. And the prompt engineering is probably our biggest challenge.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's a big part of the upskilling, right?
Jeff, I know you covered on this, but I'd like to dive a little bit deeper. And can you share a specific example of how you're using Cortex AI to boost efficiency or improve decision making? And what kind of outcomes are you already seeing?
So a couple of things. Right now, we're really in the, I call it beta mode, even though the product's not beta. We did the reporting LLM, and that's in beta mode, and customers are saying, oh, I love this. I don't have to open up a ServiceNow ticket. I can find my own stuff. So they love that, right? But every one of our dashboards that hook up to Snowflake has a reporting tab. And now every dashboard will have an AI Cortex tab. So I can only produce so many graphs and charts for people.
Right.
And as soon as I'm done, they have another question. I don't want tickets going out to my group saying, can you give me another graph, another chart? I want them to ask the English questions of any data mart that we have. So I'm super excited to be able to ask questions in the future of multiple models, chain them together into an answer. That's where it'll be amazing. Right now it's single, right? But from the standpoint, we have some pretty exciting things coming in the OR space that hopefully will revolutionize healthcare with using the AI glasses and looking at efficiency of our ORs. So we have not proven it out yet.
It's still to come. You're looking down the road here.
We're doing a proof of concept right now to hook AI glasses using Claude AI. Now imagine a surgeon walking down the hall going, what's my turnover rate? What's my first case start times? Real time while they're walking down the hall. No surgeon's going to go to their PC, log on, ask a question, log off. They need to be doing surgery, right? So we're super excited where the future could take us if it works. And we got Snowflake behind us. They're they're chomping at the bit to help us with this use case. So it's a fun time to be in healthcare right now. Yeah.
Jeff, I really appreciate your forward-looking perspective, and as your team continues to expand into the future, from your seat, is there any other elements that you're most excited about in relation to the future of healthcare data and analytics as a whole?
It's just moving so fast. I mean, we're doing a lot of image AI right now, so we're doing a lot of stuff with cancer and looking and finding tumors in images. Histotripsy is a big one for us. We offer that in the South. That's breaking up tumors with ultrasound, which is kind of cool, no invasive stuff. So we're doing a lot of clinical trials. So you talk about your NLP and looking at natural language. We can't find the attributes without that. Those queries are so sophisticated that our clinical trials are keep growing. It just helps our patients.
Right.
That's what we're centered around, right? Analytics is all about that.
Win-win, having direct impact on quality of life.
Yeah, and basic analytics is just faster.
Right.
I mean, I don't have to call my IT group and say I need a new server. I just spin it up and I'm learning the cloud, and going, I was afraid of the cost, I'm afraid of this. Now it's like, turn the baby on, let's go. It's kind of fun.
It's wonderful.
It's a lot of fun. So
wonderful to hear, Jeff.
Yeah.
And Jesse, from your standpoint, how is Snowflake going to continue to invest in the future of healthcare and life sciences as a whole?
Yeah, well, often when you ask folks in the technology space like us about what the future looks like for AI and healthcare and life sciences, you hear a lot about some of these moonshot type use cases. And I always joke that you hear that the most when that tech company is up for a funding round, for example. Everybody's saying they're going to cure cancer next. But one of the things that we're starting to see, I would say more in the more near term, is helping out with all of the day-to-day operations that happen within the healthcare environment. My family, my wife works in healthcare. I hear about the challenges on a regular basis. And I think one of the things that's fairly unique about healthcare in particular is that this industry has been operating with a shortage of personnel for several years now. Like there's nobody in this industry that wakes up every day and say, wow, that was a really light week. I wish I had a little bit more to do. That doesn't happen, right? And so, we're really starting to see a lot of impact in the short term in addressing the burden for folks. And, I think about one of our customers, Alberta Health Services. You spoke with them not too long ago. They're leveraging Snowflake Cortex for an ambient listening use case in their emergency department.
Yeah, we're doing that. We're doing that
and Jeff, in the ED, I would say it's a kind of a constant race as physicians are constantly racing against the board, trying to triage the waiting room. All the while, more and more patients are coming in, and one of the big limiting factors is documentation. They have to document every encounter with that patient, and there's typically two ways that I see physicians doing this. They have the physicians that will save everything up till the end of their shift, and then they'll spend 2 to 3 hours usually at home, doing it on unpaid time. Or you have folks that'll do it in between each patient at 20 minutes a pop, and they can see fewer patients as a result. So what these ambient listening apps are really starting to enable folks is that it will actually automate that process for them, for the physician now just has to sign off and correct where necessary. But they can see as many as 10 to 15% more patients per hour.
Wow.
So it's having an impact on the quality of life, both the patient and the physician at the end of the day.
Again, a win-win across the board. Gentlemen, such a pleasure sitting down with both of you. Thank you again.
Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
And for the audience watching, I'm Ryan Green with Data Cloud Now. We'll see you soon.